he spent 14 days in jail for a crime he did not do. His dad had gotten a heart attack. He was fired from his job. No one was willing to give him employment. Yo guys, namaskaram. So, Debu Dastak is a platform where we talk on mental health and a lot of other sensitive issues, right? So basically, the entire aim of this channel is to build a community around sensitive issues and make people feel comfortable about themselves. So basically, if you're new here, consider subscribing. Our mission is to empower you with ideas to live smartly and joyfully. The world is full of suffering, but let us increase our competence to deal with things joyfully. And just a tip, so all these are basically conversations, so I might suggest that you should watch these conversations at 1.5x. You can increase the playback speed through the button in the settings. Cheers and enjoy watching. यो गाइस नमस्कारम. सो टाइटल देख के वीडियो पे तो क्लिक कर लिया है, लेकिन ऐसा नहीं है कि आई विल टेल यू समथिंग दैट वुड नॉट रिलेट विद यू. So basically, just starting with the 26/11 attack right now. I know this is a sensitive issue for us Indians, but I just kind of want to look at it more from an objective sense rather than a subjective sense. And like, what all learnings can we have specifically from this whole news thing that happens, right? So, in 2008, there were roughly around 1.2 billion people on in our country, right? So, assuming that, 70% of them, so I'm just excluding the 30% as small kids and people who have no facilities and those kind of things, that comes to around, I think, 84 million something, right? 84 million, yeah. So assuming these people watch the news for 2 hours daily, so that's double of it, like 168 million hours roughly of human life. So considering a person lives for 1 year, a human life consists of roughly 8,76,582 hours, roughly speaking. So this life includes sleeping and everything, right? So if we kind of divide the number of hours, the people who are watching news for 2 hours daily by these human lives, so that comes to around roughly 1917 lives, or roughly 2000 lives, right? So that's like 10 times more than the actual number killed. So I think there were around 170, 180 people killed. So let's assume those are like 200 people, of course, right? So now please note that these are like proper productive waking hours. 200 lives, could build a massive product which can solve some major problems of human life, right? So this is an immense loss of productivity. So imagine like you building something or learning something that you can then later capitalize on, and of course ironically, which the news would report your success on. So that's not the point. The point here is that I just want to kind of draw your attention basically on this concept of watching the news daily. Like, do we really need so much watching of news? The people who are trying to sell us shit again and again and again, which is of course not even factual in the first place, which I'll of course prove in the coming in the coming segment of this video. So there are like three fundamental arguments which I would like to point out. The number one is, of course, news is irrelevant. Now you might say why is he talking like this? So I just want to ask you a simple question, like, how many snippets do you genuinely care for in life? Uh, do you really care for those problems, like a earthquake happening somewhere, a man being raped or a woman being raped somewhere, or let's say, does it impact your personal life, or is it like, okay, you just need a 1-2 hour entertainment and agle din you're just kind of forgetting it, right? So there's this pattern, you news just reports the problem. Like, have you even ever followed up with what the solution to that problem was? और जो आपका एक हंटर गैदरर वाला ब्रेन था, उसको बस मजा आया, नहीं नहीं ये तो एक मेरे को बस डर लग रहा है, बस उस टाइम पे एक थोड़ा सा गुस्सा या कोई ऐसा बेस ह्यूमन इमोशन आपने दिखाया उस न्यूज़ के प्रति, एंड देन यू जस्ट वेंट ऑन विद योर लाइफ बिकॉज देयर वर सो मेनी प्रॉब्लम्स. So I just want to delve on two cases. A recent case was of Rakesh Verma. So he was this guy from Chandigarh University whom everyone was accusing, right, without even knowing his story कि भाई बंदा rapist है या बंदे ने मतलब ऐसे मतलब they were alligating him on a lot of things. उसने फैला दिया है न्यू ये सारी videos audios. Like, everyone had assumed a mental image of him being a rapist, but in reality, he was a genuine person. He was doing a travel company business or something. So just link the podcast here. It was with people that he had recorded after he got out of jail, right? Because these people, these news people, reported to us the wrong facts that hooked our attention, and they targeted our moral need of men always being wrong. You biki wo cheese, right? They capitalized on that attention, and right, that all these platforms work on the more attention you give them, the more money they kind of derive. It's like the money making process is such for these firms, specifically speaking, that jitna aap in attention dete hain, utna zyada capitalize karte, right? Not even one channel came to apologize to him कि ठीक है भाई हमने गलत रिपोर्ट किया. Life just went on, right? So just to give a little bit of a context, he spent 14 days in jail for a crime he did not do, right? If there was no social media which pressurized the police to find the right person or those kind of things, क्या पता आज तक वो भी जेल पे होता, क्योंकि हमें रियल पर्सन मिलता ही ना. लाइक ऑफ कोर्स लेटर इट वाज फाउंड आउट दैट देयर वाज अ आर्मी पर्सन हु डिड ऑल ऑफ दिस, राइट? So that's one thing, right, which proves that, like, most of these cases, like, I think these people just report it for the sake of it without even actually taking the time to kind of genuine, like, check fact it. The second point is, like, it was 4 5 years ago. You might be remembering a sick person. His name was Saravjeet. So he was accused as a rapist. Like, he had this tuffle with a girl from this. It was a tuffle with the girl who was just protesting or something on the streets of Delhi, and he just wanted to go on his own side, but like the girl had some ego or something. Then she posted it on social media, and from that, like, एक पूरा moral issue ही बन गया पूरी country में बंदे के लिए. हर news channel उसे, like, rapist बोल रहा है. So he was, like, major channels were shouting rapist, Darinda, pata nahi kya kya, without even being heard, like, his side of the story. He faced a lot of issues in his life, right? His dad had gotten a heart attack. He was fired from his job, and no one was willing to give him employment, all because the facts reported on him by these news channels were based on that instant subtle need of classifying things as good and bad. Now later, if you come, like, 3 4 साल बाद आगे आके देखते हैं कि जब उनकी कोर्ट hearings हो रही है, the girl had not come to a lot of hearings, and of course I think Sarabjit had won the case or something. So he also talks about this in a podcast which he did with Shwetab, which I'll also link here. So these are like two very very fundamental cases, like, which makes us question this relevancy, like how news is relevant to our life, right? So there are n number of issues that these things report, right? Their job, which I think personally should be to just report the proper facts, but what they do instead is subtly, they kind of make us get into a framework as कि हमें कैसे सोचना चाहिए. जो हम बता रहे हैं तुम्हें, तुम वैसे सोचो, नहीं तो तुम चूती हो, right? That's the subtle message that kind of goes in. You have to think things from these perspective. जो हम तुम्हें बता रहे हैं चीख चीख के, ऐसे कोई मतलब आग बबूला होके चीख रहा है, तभी तुम हमारे स्ट्रक्चर में फिटिंग होंगे. एंड दैट्स अ बुलशिट वे ऑफ लुकिंग एट लाइफ, बिकॉज you know like who changes the world in reality, if you just ask yourself this question. So I'll take this common example of businessmen, right? And if you go more deeper into this, like, businessmen are specifically people who have developed independent thinking. They don't give a hoot as to what the crowd says or what the masses say. They just kind of observe these trends and, like, independently सोचते हैं ये चीज कहाँ कैसे fit हो रही है, right? So one point which I would like to drive from here is that, like, you should be capable of developing your own independent thinking at and that never comes from the shitty news consumption. So even if you read biographies of these successful people in terms of money, wealth, those kind of things, if you consider that parameter of being successful, most of them kind of ignore news because every day it would change, right? लाइक आपने 1 या 2 दिन पहले जो भी न्यूज़ देखी होगी, यू डोंट गिव अ फ्लाइंग फक कि अभी क्या हो रहा है, क्या उसका सोल्यूशन क्या है, हैव यू इवन फॉलोड अप विद दैट सोल्यूशन. So most of that is just mental masturbation which you do, right? It's a heavy term, but I think that's how we kind of go around news, specifically speaking, right? Now the second point here is like what it does to our well-being. Now our brains react differently to different types of information, right? So some news are targeted towards our hormones, some are targeted towards capturing our attention by deliberately giving us horrific news incidents and those kind of things, right? So if we look from their perspective, इन्हें पैसा चाहिए होता है to kind of like just run their machine. And who gives them this money? If you ask this question, it's those advertisers, you might see, right? So advertisers buy the space and then आपने देखा होगा कि मतलब एक सटल टाइप की न्यूज़ बता रहे हैं एंड उसके बाद एक उसी ही सेंस में एक प्रोडक्ट बेचने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं एडवर्टाइजर्स लोग, राइट? सो इट्स बेसिकली डन बिकॉज न्यूज़ आई थिंक इज बाय फार वन ऑफ द मोस्ट कॉमन household thing in our country. And these people kind of target those insecurities of these old people या middle aged people या जो आपके parents हैं, and they try to sell us these bloody products, like fear, greed या उन चीज़ों पे बेच के they kind of try to sell us these things. So this is just a marketing trick, right? Now what this does to our own well-being, आपने देखा होगा कि you walk around with a disturbed mental model in your mind. कहीं पे घर पे लड़ाइयाँ हो रही हैं बहुत ज़्यादा, वो fear है, या आपने generally देखा होगा the tendency to take fear, the tendency to take risks in your life is drastically reduced down. You fear a lot of things which might help you in the long run to, let's say, just develop your own being. So I might say this is just a mental model which is based on fear and you should completely kind of avoid it. So I'll also come to this point, it's not that you should ignore news altogether. Like there are just some smart hacks with which you can kind of just go around it, right? The third point is basically it creates an illusion of knowing. हमें लगता है कि हमें सब पता है, right? But I just want to ask you a fundamental question which you yourself should ask, right? Like, do you really need to know all these things? These earthquakes happening there, these plane crashes happening there, this person being raped there. Of course, it's good for awareness, but until and unless you kind of have the grit and tenacity, आपका कोई personal interest है, these are just things which you kind of get on to bullshit yourself, right? So you can use social media here to your advantage. Of course, you all have good friends, so you have your own community. So what I might say that you should have a very high trusted, or let's say high trusted friends for that matter, who just give you filtered out news, right? So initially आपको लगेगा when you're just kind of starting to drift out from news, that एक फोमो सा क्रिएट हो रहा होगा कि नहीं नहीं मतलब आई एम मिसिंग समथिंग बिग ऑन लाइफ अगर आपको बहुत ही ज्यादा न्यूज देखने की आदत है. बट generally speaking, life is far more beautiful than what these news channels are showing us. The world is much much more peaceful than what these channels show us, right? So in life we generally know what would not what would not make us successful and would not make us happy, and this is one of those things, just knowing all these negative things which do not serve you directly as well in your life, right? I don't think they would make you successful and happy in the long run. Now of course if you're preparing for government exams and those kind of things, that's a different matter altogether, because I think for there you need these news. But those people also kind of don't go by these news channels per se, they go by the newspaper. So if you're genuinely looking for news, I might say it should be around newspapers and those kind of things, and genuinely ask yourself, okay, is this fact being reported to me being true, or what's the end goal with this, specifically speaking? So I think the message here would be that it's time that we stop consuming what others want us to, and we should develop our own independent thinking, especially these news outlets, these news channels, these online, these channels. We should completely get rid of them, and make this world a beautiful place to live in, because this is our bloody time on the planet. So if we replace news with books and build solid first principles of thinking for understanding the world, that would really impact your life in the long run. Because लेट्स से अगर आप वही 2 घंटे जो आप न्यूज़ को दे रहे हो, इफ यू आर जस्ट काइंड ऑफ लर्निंग अ स्किल, बी इट एडिटिंग, learning guitar, music, whatever that skill is, you can create so much joy and happiness in the world that, like, these news channels would then come to your door to kind of, like, just capitalize on your success and just report about you, and then you have a choice. So yeah, that's the kind of message I want to give around this. So let me know how you find this video, and if you kind of find this insightful, I would definitely love your support on this channel. So every, like, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, at 7:30 we kind of publish a video. So let me know what you feel about this. And this is Debashish Pindra from Debukidastak signing off. Cheers.